Part 1, Bijou Phillips. TikTok, I need you to hear me. I don't want to start the video with a sound. I have the Alex Earl light on that clips onto the phone. So then when I start the video, I have to unclip it, say, no, I don't want to hear water, even though it's a fantastic song and an even better challenge. Anyway, let's start the series. So I didn't bring my little triangle to Miami, so I thought I'd start every series with this sound. So you're probably thinking, who is Bijou Phillips? She's not really in the news, but when I was growing up, she was very much a tabloid princess. But a while ago, on my show on YouTube, This Is My Super Bowl, my neighbors have been fighting all day because her husband can't keep a job. And if you hear her screaming, I'm on her side. I'm going to let her get it out. Okay, anyway. On the show, This Is My Super Bowl, I mentioned the mamas and the papas and how they have a really terribly dark history. If you don't know who the mamas and the papas are, yes, you do. California dreaming. A lot of people didn't know about their history. And I think talking about Bijou Phillips is important because she is a perfect example of how we are, I don't want to say the word victim, but sometimes we suffer the consequences of generational trauma and cycles. So let's get into it. So Bijou Phillips was born April 1st, 1980 in Greenwich, Connecticut. Her parents are John Phillips and Genevieve White. I am probably mispronouncing that. But John and Genevieve are her parents. Now Genevieve is John's third wife, so we're gonna have to rewind a bit. So this is John Phillips. So in 1957, the year my grandparents got married, until like 1960-ish, he was married to a Susan Adams. Susan Adams was not famous, but she came from a very, very wealthy Virginia family. Together, they had a son named Jeffrey and a daughter named Mackenzie Phillips. So while he was on tour, he's a musician, he was on tour with the Journeymen, and he met a teenager named Holly Michelle Gilliam, also known to the public as Michelle Phillips, and he ended up leaving his wife Susan for this teenager. In an interview, Michelle says this: John was 25, married, 2 children from an East Coast Catholic military family. He had gone to Annapolis, he performed in a suit and tie, he had never met anyone like me. So John had an autobiography that was published in 1986, and he says this about Michelle. Michelle stepped out of a dream. She was the quintessential California girl. She could look innocent, pouty, girlish, aloof, fray. She sounds like a teenager. Michelle says, as a teenager, she knew that she wanted to be with John, so she went to Susan Adams' house and knocked on her door, and when she answered, she goes, "I'm in love with your husband." So Susan let her in, made her a tuna sandwich, gave her a drink, and explained to young Michelle that he had a girl like her in every city. Susan never really thought that Michelle would end up stealing John. I mean, you can't really steal a man, but he left Susan for Michelle. So in 1962, he moves to New York, marries Michelle. Michelle was not with the tour. He just met her on tour. And apparently he was so possessive that while he was on tour, he would put her in like room and board for teenage professionals at that time in every city that they went to. This room and board was supervised. She's someone's wife. But at the end of the day, she's in the dorm with teenage professionals. Whatever the fuck that means. But at the time, Michelle had a modeling contract, and she says, "I was having a great time in New York City. I'd just been offered a big contract to do teenage lingerie, okay, which was my specialty. Lingerie paid double. I'm sure it did, because people are gross." Yes. So Michelle was about to sign a big modeling contract, and in order to keep her by his side, John pulled her away from the contract and signed her up for voice lessons and made her part of the band so she could sing next to him. They have a child together, China Phillips, who is part of the band, Wilson Phillips. If you don't know who that is, you're killing me, but you might recognize them from Bridesmaids. Denny Doherty was a member in the band, and soon after Michelle joined, they had an affair. These bandmates, they're just It's like working in a restaurant. You're all fucking each other. Sorry, hospitals too. So John and Michelle divorced in 1969. The same year we went to the moon. Chrissy Carlson Romano. January 30th, 1972, John marries Genevieve. They met the summer of 1969 when he was on the outs with Michelle, and they would do drugs together on the beach in Malibu, as most love stories begin. You know, I'm not joking. I feel like a lot of love stories start off by like getting fucked up on the beach. Genevieve was in a 60s film called Joanna, and she had a record produced by her husband John that came out in 1964 that did well. John would often refer to Genevieve as his muse and collaborator. Oh, to be a muse! Even though most stories about muses are like heavily abusive. So, yeah. Their relationship is very chaotic and riddled with addiction, just not what you would call happy and stable and healthy. Here they are in 1975. So 1980 rolls around and they have Bijou, right? On the 1st of April in Connecticut. They name her Bijou. Bijou means French. Bijou is jewel in French, and they named her after a song. I think it's like My Little Bijou by Lambert. It's a song. My Petite Bijou. Okay, it's a song. Her godfather is Andy Warhol. So I'm laughing because it's like crazy, you know, like it's ridiculous. My godparents are like my uncle, and like, well, I have an Uncle Laura, because when I was little, I didn't understand that you could have aunts. I thought everybody was an uncle. So you can have Andy Warhol. I have Uncle Laura. So so in 1985, John and Genevieve divorce, and Bijou is placed in foster care because the court deems this couple unfit to take care of their children. By the end of The Mamas and the Papas, they had both succumbed to a pretty heavy drug addiction, where after shows they would participate in drug use intravenously. Is that how you say it? You know what I mean? Like with, you know, like in the arm. You know what I mean? I'm just trying to be sensitive to community guidelines, but please tell me you know what I'm saying. It also sounds like Genevieve was going through a really, really tough mental, her mental health was deteriorating. Legendary groupie and mother to live Tyler, BB Buell, recalled in an interview that Genevieve told her that she knew how to hurt her wrists enough where there was a lot of, but without having to end her life. So it just sounds like it's just not something someone in a good place would say. A lot of hemoglobin? If I use science terminology, will you keep this up for me, tiki-toki? So in 2018, Bijou Phillips posted this photo to Instagram with the caption, I'm gonna read it to you. When I was little, 3 maybe, I was placed in foster care because my parents were unfit and they spent years and years fighting for custody, so I bounced around a lot. My foster parents were so great. This is my foster father, Derry, and my foster sister, Rita. I'm still really close with my foster family and I love them so much. I'm going home to see them this summer. When I was a kid separated from my parents, I remember my mother coming and wanting to take me and just wanting to go with her so much and screaming and crying and gripping the door. I was dragged inside. It took 2 adults and the door closed. I didn't see her again for months. It's a pain I still feel, and I look at my baby and I can't imagine that happening to us. I look at these kids being taken. It breaks my heart because I so deeply know that pain, and it's pain that never goes away. I'm so lucky I had such a loving and safe foster parents and such a wonderful place and house to live. A big reason why I know how to mother my parents is because of them. Families belong together unless they don't, and I have for sure seen so much of that. Part 2, Bijou Phillips. When she was 13, John Phillips was awarded custody of Bijou Phillips. When she was around 15, her half-sister Mackenzie, if you remember from his first marriage with Susan, you might also recognize Mackenzie for 90s kids out there. If you watch the show So Weird, it was kind of like X-Files for kids. She's the mom that's the rock star that the kids are on tour with. And I specifically remember the episode where she fears that technology has become sentient, and she starts talking nice to her laptop. Do you remember? Do you know what I'm talking about? Anyway, that's Mackenzie Phillips, okay? But Mackenzie Phillips, her half-sister, just another TW here, I'm going to write it up here somewhere too, confided in Bijou that when she was 19, that her and her father had begun a sensual, but they were playing boyfriend and girlfriend. And later on in an autobiography by Mackenzie wrote that they would do drugs together. And she blacked out once, and when she came to, she was being intimate with her father. Unfortunately, she suffered a lot of emotional manipulation from this man, and it was a consensual relationship for 10 years. Her first boyfriend in her life was her father for 10 years, and it only ended because Mackenzie was pregnant, and she feared that it was her father's, so she terminated her pregnancy. This Bijou says in various interviews that she looks back and she's very confused and also hurt that her family would leave her alone with John, which leads me to believe that her family may have had an inkling as to what was going on. Fearful, no, this must have happened when she was 14 then, because at 15, I think it was, Bijou filed and won for legal emancipation. And she moved into an apartment off Fifth Avenue with a housekeeper. And the results are tale as old as time. She soon became one of New York's most notorious party girls. I first started seeing her online clubbing on various gossip sites. Like, do you remember Oh No They Didn't? I think that was one. Perez Hilton was another one, of course. But she ran in a lot of the same circles as other socialites. So she soon became one of the most notorious party girls in New York, and she became addicted to heroin, and she's also modeling. She's actually the youngest person to ever appear on a cover of Vogue. She was 13 on the cover of Vogue Italia. Here she is. Bijou's beautiful. She's beautiful. She looks like something out of like the 60s, you know? Here's another photo of her. When she was 15, she also did a Calvin Klein ad in her underwear, and Calvin Klein was heavily scrutinized for sexualizing a child. It's also, I think, like, the same thing happened with Brooke Shields, right? The Guardian wrote this article about Bijou Phillips' teenage life. Bijou partied. She drank and took drugs, anything from ecstasy and heroin. She flashed her to photographers on what seemed like a regular basis. Hey, who hasn't? What is it, illegal? It is, isn't it? Whatever. Anyway. And at 15, she lost her virginity to famously drug-binging singer Evan Dando. I don't know why I said even. Evan Dando. She grew up on the pages of America's tabloids, where readers lapped up stories of her precocious misbehavior, how she ended an affair with Cher's son Elijah Blue by throwing his belongings out of the window. I don't know what the story is. Women's rights? Women's wrongs? How she allegedly tried to French kiss one girl interviewer. And how she half sliced a man's finger off with a cigar cutter in New York's Spy Bar. When asked if her family knew what was going on in her life, she said this: my dad always knew what I was up to. All he had to do was look at the New York Post. There were no secrets. I was 14 years old. What was I supposed to do? If you were 14 years old and able to live on your own apartment in New York City, and you got invited to all these clubs, and you have a bank account and you have a car service, you would call so that you could go wherever you wanted. What do you think would happen? I mean, yeah, I would be a Looney Tune. I'd be a Looney Tune. I promise I can read. So choppy. I think it's because I get nervous. You know, like, you're looking at me, I'm looking down, I want to maintain eye. I get nervous around you. What do you want? At 17, she says that her life fell apart when her very good friend and photographer Davide Sorrenti, passed away from an overdose. And you know what? I think sometimes we forget how young kids look. But this is a picture of Davide. That's a baby. That's a baby. So Davide sadly passed away and succumbed to his addiction in during a time in fashion history in the 90s known as heroin chic. And it is extremely, extremely thin models. And this term was partly coined because of Davide's passing. He was kind of known for glamorizing very, very skinny, emaciated looking models. I don't even think he was glamorizing them. I think he was just shooting his friends, to be honest, while they suffered from addiction. Even Bill Clinton commented on this during his presidency. Almost knocked over the tripod. That would have been bad. He said, stop burping. Shut up, I just ate takombi. Okay, Bill Clinton. You do not need to glamorize addiction to sell clothes, Clinton remarked. Should I do it in the Bill Clinton figure? You do not need to glamorize addiction to sell clothes. The glorification of heroin is not creative, it's destructive. It's not beautiful, it's ugly. And this is not about art, it's about life and death. And glorifying death is not good for any society. When John Phillips learned that Bijou's friend had passed away, this prompted him to send Bijou to rehab. And by 21, she was sober. And she later says that this is the best decision that he could have ever made for her. The Guardian wrote this in their profile about her. She sits on a sofa in a photographer's studio. 2 parts nerves and 1 part feistiness. Dressed in a pink skirt, brown mock sheepskin jacket. Chic. Feet tucked under her, she is as jaded as any middle-aged rock star, but with the fragile self-confidence of any post-adolescent. It's an awkward mixture, but like any 21-year-old, she detests being reminded of what she was like when she was a teenager. When I was a teenager, I was asking my 9-year-old brother to take digital camera photos of me and screaming at him when they weren't cool. His finger was like in every photo. I feel so bad. When she was actually two weeks shy of turning 21, her father passed away from heart failure due to years of drug abuse. And someone asked her, how has your father's death changed you? What has it changed in you? Everything, she says. She turns away to stare out of the window. Everything. My life sucks since he went away. I can't talk about it. And she stopped working. She just rode her horse Jupiter in upstate New York for a while. But she does say something really interesting. Her father's death showed her that he was a great father to her, and she was just angry because she was projecting her sister's anger. I'll read you the quote. It's interesting. My dad was a great dad, she said, an awesome dad. He had his own problems. He took custody of me. He took me to school every single day, made me breakfast, picked me up, made me dinner. When I used to be angry at him, it really wasn't my anger. It was more Mackenzie and China's anger. It was sort of projecting that. They were so pissed off at him. I thought, well, I'll be pissed off too. If my big sisters are telling me that my dad's an asshole, then okay, he's an asshole. Now it's like, wow, he did such a good job. This is a baby who lost her dad, though. You know, I'm not going to sit up here and tell her, you know, I'm not going to sit up here and tell anybody how to feel after they lose a parent and what that must feel like, especially a parent that had been abusive to their siblings and they had maybe seen the best side of them. That must be terrible. That must be terrible. During this time, when she lost her father, she was dating Sean Lennon. Does that name sound familiar to you? Hello. Okay, part 3, Bijou Phillips. So, during this time, she was seeing a boy named Sean Lennon, who is John and Yoko's son. They started dating year 2000. She was 21, and he was 26. There's not a lot of information about this relationship other than she was living with Yoko and Sean in their family home, and here they are all together. That's a good coat. God, she's cool. She's just cool. She's just cool, you know? If I wore that, I'd look like I was like in a Lifetime holiday special, but she's just cool, okay? They break up in 2004 because Bijou sleeps with his best friend, Max Leroy, who lived down the hall of their apartment building. The Leroys own the iconic restaurant Tavern on the Green, Or my uncle and my aunt got married in 1964. Didn't the Kennedys get married there? No, I made that up. Okay, good. So after Sean found out about the affair, he had all of Bijou's things removed from the apartment and told all of his friends, she's history. One of his friends told the Daily Mail that he was like, she's done. If she comes near me, she'll be met with armed security guards. Like, I'm done with her. But what's really sad is that Max Leroy, his best friend, passed away shortly after. And that's one of Sean's biggest regrets, that he feels like stupid for not reconciling with him. He died from a motorcycle accident. And he had an album come out called Friendly Fire about the people closest to you, like betraying you. Very, very sad. After, where am I going with this? Am I going to talk about her acting? I am. So she has done some really cool acting jobs. She was in Almost Famous. I'm a golden god. Love that movie. The Hollywood Reporter named her, in 2002 named her one of Hollywood's rising stars. She's done projects with Jeff Bridges and Anne Hathaway, but unfortunately, Bijou was not easy to work with. She had quite a reputation for being a bully at best and an attacker at worst. Daniel Francesi from Mean Girls. Danny DeVito, I love your work. Him. Big pink polo. Actually worked with her on a project ironically called Bully, where he says that he was body shamed by her and bullied by her, harassed by her. He actually made a Facebook post about it, and he says that Bijou body shamed him and ridiculed the actor for being gay. He also alleged that Bijou physically assaulted him on set by twisting his nipple and kicking him in the back of the head. So Bijou then apologized. She apologized and she said, I know Daniel to be a trustworthy and honest person, and to find out through social media I was not the friend I thought I was to him made me so sad. I am so mortified by this behavior and have contacted Daniel and apologized to him privately. But also, Princess Diaries actors Heather Matarazzo told Daniel on a podcast, he has a podcast, she visited the podcast, that she was also physically assaulted by Bijou before they started filming Hostel. So Heather says that Bijou threw her against a wall and then choked her for almost 20 seconds. And Heather referred to it as one of the most horrifying moments in her life. Hey, she sounds a little troubled. Right. Just gonna say. I think I can give her, that card. It sucks that she did that. I don't excuse it. I don't think you should put your hands on anybody. I'm not out here twisting people's nipples. Just my brother's poor baby. Sometimes my sister. Sometimes I'm a big sister. I have to hold my place. But yeah, I don't condone that. Definitely at the workplace. Can you imagine if you were reading someone's statement about me and they said I came up to them and twisted their nipple and kicked the back of their head? What? If I was on set with somebody and they're like, hey, come here, I went, and it, oh my God. In 2005, at a poker tournament, Bijou went on to meet her future husband from that 70s show. You're gonna tell me generational? It's good. This is why I wanted to do this series on Bijou, because I just wanted to highlight how we are sometimes stuck in cycles, or sometimes we grow up. How do I say this? I have heard many times from people who have been abused that abuse did not reach their other siblings, That doesn't make their abuse any lesser, but I can understand why that's so painful. But I just want to say, just because you weren't physically abused, or just because it wasn't you, doesn't mean that you don't absorb some of that. Those fucked up love languages, what you look for in a partner, what you look for, what you deem as safe, what you or what you attract, almost not what you attract, but what you find attractive, psychologically, we are attracted to what we are used to, or sometimes we're attracted to people who mirror the worst parts of us. I look back on other relationships and I'm like, our demons were perfect for each other, whatever it is. But I look back and I think about the way that I learned love and affection. And, you know, it's no secret, if I can get vulnerable for a second, before we continue talking about Bijou, I had one parent that came and went as he pleased into my life. And now I, you know, have an affinity for people that are not consistent in my life. And I feel sometimes, hey, do I somehow look for that? You know, so let's get into it. So they meet in 2005. In 2009, Bijou does an interview with Paper Magazine and says that every guy at the table, at the poker table, is flirting with her except for Danny. And she joked with the magazine that he wouldn't laugh at any of her jokes. So by the end of the night, she's like, who the fuck is this Danny Masterson? And what the fuck does he think he's doing? Danny says something interesting about his wife, okay? I want to read it to you, and I want to discuss. Masterson confessed that at the time he only knew about his now wife by reputation only, calling her a little crazy girl. He continued, after Vegas and talking to her a few times, I was shocked by how unbelievably intelligent she was. She knew every book I had ever read. I was like, this girl's amazing. I love when people find a way to compliment themselves. She's just as smart as me. So while we don't know a lot about the inner workings of their relationship, we do know that they are members of the Scientology, the Church of Scientology, and they feel very strongly about this. I'm going to read you a quote. Phillips voiced her disdain for psychiatrists, explaining that her grandparents didn't take any pills and they were fine. Were they? Okay. And Masterson echoed that sentiment. You will not find a Scientologist who does not fucking hate psychiatrists. We know, he explained, because the solution for mental and spiritual problems is drugs. Okay. It's just, okay. So let's talk about putting a Band-Aid on something that's just going to get worse and worse and worse. Scientology handles those things, those mental problems that people have. It gets rid of them. Does it, Danny? Does it get rid of them? Maybe it does, allegedly. Scientology, I don't want any smoke. I'm just a storyteller. These are just stories. It gets rid of them by that person doing it for themselves. A DIY, no? Later on in their lives, Danny Masterson would be accused of pretty heinous crimes. And I think there are some indicators that Bijou was going to stick beside him for as long as she did. One, she told Oprah Winfrey that Mackenzie telling her about her father angered her. And then she gave a statement to Us Weekly. Is it US Weekly? I never fucking know. Okay. Mackenzie's history with her father is hers, but also clouded with 30 years of drug abuse. I hope she can come to terms with this and find peace. Part 4, Bijou Phillips. Before we continue, I just want to say that this is a rapist, so I'm going to cover him. Okay. Thank you. So, okay, part 4, Bijou Phillips. Let's continue with her statement from Us US Weekly. I hope she comes to terms with this and finds peace. The life I had with my father was very different. He was Mr. Mom, encouraging and loving. The man that raised me... Oh. Families are so complex. The man that raised me would never be capable of doing such things. And if he was, it is heartbreaking to me to think that family would leave me alone with him. Maybe it's the only way that she can forgive her family is if he didn't do it. You know? I understand Mackenzie's need to come clean with a history. I don't know what makes me want to cry. History she feels will help others, but it's devastating to have the world watch as we try to mend broken fences, especially when the man in question isn't here to defend himself. She later shares in her Mackenzie Phillips, her older half-sister, shares in her book, there are loving and painful memories of the effed up family I wouldn't trade for the world. I wish I could remember an events I know my whole being wants to erase forever. So yeah. In 2006, they get married. In 2014, they have a baby. They got married in Ireland because of his Irish descent. Did your parents not want a Catholic? Whatever, doesn't matter. Earlier this year, Danny went to jail for the rape and assault of, I believe, 5 people, and the majority of them belonged to Scientology. And Bijou came out and said that her husband was an amazing father. She would walk him to court every day. Apparently, when they read out the guilty verdict, she burst out into tears. He blew her a kiss in the courtroom. Nasty. You can read about the court case if you want. It's nasty. She was devastated by the guilty verdict. She said that she never expected him to be found guilty. And then in September, she filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, which must have been earth-shattering. I think they got married after like 6 or 7 years together. This was her statement from her lawyer. Ms. Phillips has decided to file for divorce from her husband during this unfortunate time. Her priority remains with her daughter. This period has been unimaginably hard on the marriage and the family. Yeah. Mr. Masterson was always present for Miss Phillips during her most difficult times of her life. That's what it is. And Miss Phillips acknowledges that Mr. Masterson is a wonderful father to their daughter. I do not know these people, but I just want to let you know that sometimes people power trip so much that they need to be the one that always fixes you. They need to be the parent in the relationship, or the fuck it is. Or mend some kind of hole for themselves about being in power. And that's what these attacks are all about. It's never about intimate sex. It's about power. And Danny Masterson sounds like a very powerless individual. A very pathetic, powerless individual. She changed her name to Bijou Masterson, and she requested that her name be changed back to Phillips. I just want to say, like, when we're younger, I think all of us want like a very eventful life. We want like a full life. We want these like crazy nights out, you know, like I know a lot of people watch Gossip Girl. I've only watched like a few episodes. I need to get into it. But like that kind of life of like going, a socialite life, you know, I definitely watched that with Nicole Richie and Paris Hilton and Nikki Hilton, of them going to these clubs in New York and like wearing the nicest clothes and partying with other famous people and idolizing this life. But I think as we have gotten older and they've gotten older, we've learned a lot about their lives and how things follow us for as long as we let them. But feelings are very, very complicated. Families are complicated. Love muddles everything in the best way and in the worst way. And I don't make these series to judge anyone. I just want to tell people stories. If you or a loved one, anyone you know, has ever been in a situation where lines have been crossed and blurred, I can't imagine how difficult that is for you. I just want us to be weary about not welcoming those stories into other chapters of our lives. And that's why we got to do the work. And I hope Bijou and Mackenzie and anybody affected by Danny Masterson or John Phillips or whoever finds their way to writing their own chapters instead of writing the same ones over and over again.